everyone, and a very warm welcome to day 3 of International Leadership Week 2021. I'm John Mark Williams. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Leadership and Management, and I'm delighted to be hosting this conversation today. Just a reminder of ILW21, that's hashtag ILW21. We're running 25 events over this 5 days this week with expert speakers from around the globe, all addressing this year's theme, Leadership Reinvented. Today, I'm joined by Simerjeet Singh, listed amongst top 10 motivational speakers for 2021 by the Indian Speaker Bureau and in the top 20 on the Best Global Trainers website. Simerjeet has worked with clients right across the globe, across various industries, clients like HP, IHG, Novo Nordisk and PwC, and is an expert on transformational leadership. He brings the freshness of an outsider's perspective, and his purpose is to empower leaders and change makers. And we'll explore some of that in our discussion today. So, Simerjeet, welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, John, for having me, and thank you to your amazing team for putting this remarkable event together over 5 days. And the theme, I must congratulate you and your team on picking the theme, which is so appropriate for the times, Leadership Reinvented. We need to reinvent leadership, the way we work, the way we connect, and everything. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And of course, Leadership Reinvented lends itself, I think, very nicely to this idea of transformational leadership, about which we hear quite a lot, actually, from time to time. Can I start by asking you, what is different about transformational leadership?
If I could put it really, really simply for everybody to understand, I'll say it's leadership on steroids. So it's like an accelerated version of what leaders ought to do. And a little disclaimer here, my definition of transformational leadership is not the textbook B-school definition of transformational leadership. It's how I perceive what leaders ought to be doing, what the current needs of the world are, the business world and the world that we live in. And I think if I were to point out 2 or 3 major aspects about transformational leadership, number one, it's about challenging the status quo. Number one, it's about having people in the system who dare to challenge the status quo, who dare to question. And number two, it's about the belief. It's about leaders who first, believe themselves that a better future is possible, that a better world can be created, who are optimistic about what lies ahead. And then they can inspire the same belief in others and those that they lead. That's the second aspect. So the ability to challenge the status quo with a bold, empowering vision, which gets everybody excited. Number 2, the self-belief and the ability to inspire the same belief in other people that, yes, things can be changed. The world can be improved for the better. Workplaces can become better. That we are not stuck in a rut. That we don't need to give up. That a better tomorrow might just be around the corner. And the third is about leaders who are not afraid of the 3 C's, the change, the challenges, and the competition, but who welcome these 3 C's, who use these 3 C's as catalysts for growth. So it's about a leadership mindset which is not scared of change, which does not have a hangover of the past, John, which are not stuck in the, some of our leadership management practices are still stuck in the Stone Age. Take accounting, some of the accounting principles, for example. People are still an expense, while inanimate things like our desks and our buildings, they are assets, and people are an expense. And we're still looking, operating from the same paradigm. So it's about, think of, the image that comes to my mind about transformational leadership is, think of Martin Luther King Jr. with this speech, I Have a Dream. His belief that is possible, his belief that equality is possible, his ability to articulate that idea and inspire millions across the world. Think of Mahatma Gandhi, the frail old man who inspired the same belief in millions of Indians that they too have the right to self-governance, they too have the ability for self-governance. Think of Elon Musk, for example, going to put a man on Mars. And humanity must be an interplanetary species, and he just says it so casually as if it's already done, right? And Think of Nelson Mandela walking out of that prison after 27 years and saying, I must forgive these guards. I must forgive the system that put me there because I believe that healing is the way forward. His focus on the mission that he was about to accomplish was so strong. And that's another aspect of transformational leaders. They put mission first. It's not about them. It's not about their egos.
This is really, really interesting. A lot of depth in what you've said there. Very clearly, the vision is at the foundation for all of this. Do you think it is, I was going to say, do you think it is possible? We see it in some of the people that you've just mentioned. Do you think that kind of power in vision is possible in those of us who are, dare I say, slightly more ordinary mortals than some of the people that you mentioned?
And I say that this is perhaps one of the things we need to do away with, this mindset, this belief that somehow these people that I mentioned or those that we look up to are any different than you and I or those who are tuned into this conversation right now. Let me read this little passage from the ancient Indian sage Patanjali, who said, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. Dormant forces, faculties, and talents become alive. The abilities you did not even know existed, they become alive, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed was possible. Patanjali, he said this thousands of years ago. And that's my answer to that question. We all have within us the ability to be transformational leaders in our organizations, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our families, by tuning in and discovering what makes me come alive. What is that mission that will reignite my spark? And I got to find it. That's our work as leaders. That's the leader's primary work.
That's a tremendously powerful thought, this idea that we can all be visionaries. And how do we manage to balance that, maintaining that vision within ourselves with actually finding the time to support our teams who are, we hope, also buying into that vision? Because keeping our own internal motivation can sometimes be a challenge.
Absolutely, but I believe if you're tuned in into that purpose, if it's not for some superficial thing that you want to achieve, if you have, as Kobe Bryant used to say, get over yourself. if a leader is able to get over herself or get over himself and understand it's not about you, or as John Maxwell he says it beautifully, the goal is more important than the role, which means if you're able to follow that in your own leadership practice, if you're able to put that across to other team members as well, it's not about who I am, it's not about where I want to go, it's about where we want to go collectively, that sense of shared aspirations together. And it's about utilizing the strengths of those in your team. So then what will happen, John, as a consequence is the amount of work as a leader that you will have to spend firefighting typical organizational issues will go down drastically. If you're able to. But then all the stuff that we talked about, this is often overlooked as, motivational, inspirational, but not practical. And that's the belief that I want to challenge here today, that we got to explore that dimension within ourselves. I worked for 8 years in the hospitality industry, and it can be tough and challenging. I've worked for 11 years, all my birthdays, New Year's, all sort of occasions when you're supposed to be with the family, was spent working. It can be a very tough industry, as people who are watching might resonate with them. But what kept me going was tuning into the positive aspects of what I'm about to do. And there'll always be things that you don't like. There's always be things that you would wish you would want them to disappear, but then that's part of the deal. They're there, and now as a leader, are you able to look at those empowering perspectives, the positive side? Are you able to help your team look towards the positive side? Because it's never going to be a perfect setting for anybody. But the best thing would be for you and your team to be able to look back at what you accomplished together. And for everybody to take a deep breath in and say, wow, I was part of that. I was part of that team.
Yeah. And the thing that springs out of that, and what you've said there, is that this visioning, if I call it this, which sounds, if we look backwards, sounds like a bit of a fluffy word. Visioning is actually an intensely practical skill, not only with ourselves, but actually in utilizing and motivating other people. Do you think? How do you think the last 2 years has actually affected our ability, with people remote working or hybrid working much more now? How do you think that's affected the ability of leaders to be practical in the application of that visioning and that motivation?
It's been a challenging time across industries, aviation, hospitality, learning and development, schools and colleges and governments across the world. It's been, and I think this is why we are leaders, right? To be ready for such challenges, to be ready for such tests. I think it was Grover Cleveland who said, the ability of the captain is measured not in calm waters, but in turbulent waters during a storm. So our ability as leaders, as thought leaders or organizational leaders, was put to test during the last 18 months. And I hope that what these last 18 months have done for people across the world is it has helped us realize what's important and what's not, right? I hope leaders have understood that technology enables, but it's human beings ultimately who are the strongest pillar of any human achievement, right? Technology is there to help. Artificial intelligence can make life easier, and machine learning and all those new things coming in. But at the end of the day, we've got to put the human aspect of work, the human aspect of leadership back into the center stage. And I think over the last several decades, chasing profits, chasing so many other things, we had started to overlook that. I hope that this pandemic has served to bring it back to the forefront once again.
That's very timely indeed, because if and I agree absolutely that the pandemic has helped highlight what we do that is valuable, and the fact it is the human beings that do the valuable stuff, really.
Right.
Having said that, one of the other things that the pandemic has highlighted is not just the usefulness, but the importance of technology. Do you think we'll be able to capitalize on that recognition that humanity is a function of leadership, whilst the technology continues to play such a very large part in how we do leadership in the future?
And it should, it should. We should welcome it. We should, the whole, and leaders should help to sort of assuage any fears that might be around technology and help do the hand-holding, the reskilling, the learning and development that needs to come in order for people to navigate these new technologies that are coming in every day. What I see is people get so scared of the new piece of software or new piece of equipment or whatever it's coming. But if you have to succeed, this is the number one insurance policy that you can take out right now to future-proof your career is to be open to change, and be flexible, be agile, and that's in our basic human nature. It was my younger daughter's birthday the other day, John, and I was with these bunch of kids, and the amount of fun that they were having, and there were no rules, and I was thinking to myself, as we grow up, fair enough, we need rules, otherwise organizations will go haywire. We need a structure in place. But at the same time, to not let that, I'm a grown up now, so that there's this fixed way of looking at things. I've always done it that way. This is how it used to be, how dare you change it, right? And I'm going to protest against this change happening. But the essence of life is flexibility, and we need to learn that from young kids, how quickly they recover from setbacks. They don't take setbacks personally, and they're just having fun. And that's a perspective transformational leaders should take, is to not take themselves too seriously, understand we're on a joint exploration project together.
That's a great way to describe it. And I remember actually the child of a friend of mine actually
Hmm.
saying something which made me realize the different way that children look at things. And she was using a coloring book. And it was one of these that
Hmm.
had, black and white lines drawn all over it, and you've colored in the
Right.
pictures, stuff like this. And of course, her coloring was all over the place and stuff like that. And I just said something like, "Oh, that looks very nice. What is it?" And she said, "Oh, it's a so and so so and so." I said, "It doesn't look very much like the picture underneath." And her
Mm.
response was, "No, but if you color outside the lines, you can get it right." And I thought,
Well,
actually, color outside the lines. It's
well,
fine.
John, imagine if Picasso would have been given the instructions that you got to color within the lines, or
Exactly.
Picasso looks like you're very good at coloring, and here's a picture, and now create a replica of it, and that
Yeah.
would be a very sad situation for Picasso and for us. The art that he brought to life would not exist today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when we think about transformational leadership, maybe one of the tenets of transformational leadership, and certainly that you seem to espouse, is actually it's okay to color outside the lines, because
Of
that's how
course,
the
yeah.
transformation is going to happen.
Definitely, definitely. There's got to be a framework, and within the framework, we should all have the liberty to explore, to innovate, and I think leaders need to be mindful. On the one side, we are preaching, the innovate, take risks and come up with something new. On the other side, we also got to provide people with psychological safety. So to tell your people, hey, look, if you fail on this, I'm there to back you up, but go try this out, right? I'm sure you can do it. It's about inspiring that self-belief within people. So think about King Ferdinand of Spain when he sent Columbus on that mission. Go find me a new land, but don't you fail, right? He didn't say that. He obviously didn't say the second part of it, right? He said, go. Here's money. Here's money. Here are ships. Here are men to support you on your mission. Go find me a new land, and
Yep.
the rest is history.
The rest is history. Absolutely right. Now, Simerjeet, from working across many sectors as you have, particularly some of those, as you mentioned, like aviation and hospitality, which are, of course, competitive like all sectors, but which have actually suffered quite powerfully over the course of the last few years. Do you see what new trends do you see emerging in not just in leadership, but in the way they are transforming themselves?
I think number one we already spoke about is technology.
Yep.
And let's be very clear about it. It's going to permeate every aspect of how we live and work, right? From bots to algorithms to humanoids to artificial learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, all of these. Think about when the internet was invented. It was first more like an intranet, an internal network from one of the universities. I don't know which one it was, and then think about how the internet has changed our lives over the next 20, 30 years or 40 years ever since it's been around, right? Same with electricity. Now think about these new technologies that are still in a nascent stage. And fast forward 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when there are economies of scale, when there's mass manufacturing, when there's newer versions of these technologies being released. We used to hire a video editor to do a lot of complex work earlier. And now there's a software available where we can just put in a bunch of pictures and a bunch of text, and the machine learning algorithm will, with astounding accuracy, put together a video in under 30 minutes, right? What's a human being used to take so many days to do before. So good thing that technology is going to take away the 3Ds, the dull, the dirty, the dangerous jobs. Now that human time and creativity is freed up, it's up to leadership to ensure that we're able to put that extra time, the extra creativity, the human ingenuity, which is the force behind all of these creations in the first place, to good use. That's up to us leaders to ensure, to do the hand-holding that is required during this time, to tell people that, look, this tool is not there to take your job. Take it as a stepping stone to something better that you can do with your life. So technology is trend number one. Number two is, I think, stems from number one, learning and development. Organizations which can provide like a university campus sort of environment for continued learning will be the ones that will thrive in the future.
Okay.
the ones that operate with the mindset, you went to a great university, you did pretty well on your grades, and now education is over, and now we take it from here. That won't work, because you perfected certain systems and policies which were perhaps relevant and served you well 10 years ago, but the world is changing every single day. So the continued learning and development of our workforce is trend number 2. Technology number 1, learning and development. I think the number 3 is about change, because we're not going back to the good old days, right? The world has deeply changed due to this entire COVID situation, due to the lockdowns. We were forced digital literacy, people adopting digital tools was accelerated in a way that we could have never imagined. And there's going to be a lot of question marks around traditional models, and leaders should be ready for those question marks. In the US, the news is already coming in about the Great Resignation. Here in India, we had a very interesting trend, John. We've got folks in the last year of their bachelor's or their master's program who did the entire 1 year online, had now been hired by companies to work from home. So picture this, for 2 years, there's been minimal or zero human interaction with, as far as outside the family.
Yep.
Think about, the repercussions of this. Think about teamwork and collaboration and interpersonal skills and conflict management and culture building and so many other things when you have not met the people that you work with face to face over 1 year. So we need to be ready to, as leaders, we need to be ready to address those challenges. So top 3 trends: technology, learning and development, and around question marks, I think. There's question marks around higher education. A lot of institutes reporting a huge drop in the number of enrollments for STEM programs here in India, or business programs across the world. They're saying, if I could learn from LinkedIn or YouTube or podcasts and the leading world's experts and free courses on other platforms, do I really need to take out a $100,000 loan and spend 2 years just to get the big name on my CV? So question marks, huge question marks.
Very interesting, especially that last point about higher education, about education generally, I guess, which has been a face-to-face function at every level of our education and things, and that transformation required, and 3 very clear trends there, which I think are great. One of the other things I think, and it's been picked up in one of the questions in our comments, which is around the language that we use in terms of leadership and management, actually, and particularly the language of failure, because during the course of transformation, as you will know much better than me, some things work and some things don't. And in the olden days, we would have said that thing failed, and with a very negative implication.
Yep.
Do we need to change some of the language that we use so that either failure becomes less daunting, or that actually we start to use different ways to describe things which are not a success, or whatever we mean by that?
Great observation there, John, and I think it is interconnected with our education system. Let's go back to the color within the lines example, or we got people rote memorizing answers to things that they should come up creativity and spontaneously. We have youngsters rote memorizing a lot of that information, and that is the mindset which is brought into the workplace. And of course, anything outside the lines is frowned upon, and that will discourage innovation. Yes, absolutely. We need to change the way we perceive failure. Think about, I'm going to pick an example here from SpaceX and vertical landings. If people who followed the story of this humanity going to Mars, or these big leaps of technological advancement that the SpaceX team has achieved, one of the landmarks was reusing the rockets. And to enable to do that, they needed to land the rocket back vertically, which had never been done before in the history of rocket science. Yep. And there were multiple failures, public failures, which cost SpaceX, the stock price plummeted. Elon Musk's personal reputation was at stake. Failure after failure. They tried multiple formats. They said, let's send out a drone ship and let's try to land this rocket in the sea where we can move the drone ship in order to calibrate with the rocket landing. And guess what? Now that's behind them now. That was 5 years ago. And now vertical landings are like an everyday thing for the SpaceX team. So I don't think that would have been possible if that culture would not have permitted experimentation, let's call it that, not failure.
Right.
If they did not have the psychological safety to say, hey, we got to make this happen. It's never been done before. And I think that's where the kick is. If you allow, I'll read these few lines from one of my favorite poets, Edgar Albert Guest, who said, there is no thrill in easy sailing. There is no thrill in easy sailing when the skies are clear and blue. There's no joy in merely doing things which anyone can do, but there is some satisfaction that is mighty sweet to take when you reach a destination that you thought you'd never make. When you reach a destination that you thought you'd never make.
I think that's an absolutely superlative point to make, actually, Simerjeet, and I can't think of a more powerful point at which to end our conversation. Actually, I think that's brilliant. I just wanted to pick up a couple of points from what you've said, really, because this has been enlightening in many ways, very many ways, actually. And a couple of things that came out of it for me. One was this idea, first of all, that we can all be visionaries. And not only that, we should all be visionaries. Right. And not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. And I think the power that clearly resides in that self-belief is something that is, I guess, probably a requirement for transformation in many cases. Indeed. I like the idea of that visioning being a practical skill, which is actually not something that we think of as fluffy or soft or something that only intellectuals do. Actually, this is something that people do who want to transform organizations and the world. And this idea of the goal being more important than the role. And I think the idea that fits with the Institute's principle of leadership being everywhere and stuff like this. The goal, which is the vision that we all have jointly, is far more important than the role that each of us plays. And I think that you have articulated that, and the case actually for transformation in a human way superlatively well today. And I thank you for that, Simerjeet, very, very much indeed. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you, John.
If I can just say before we close, everybody, please do ensure that you log on to our website, www.institutelm.com, to reserve your place at any of the upcoming events. They're all free to access. And you can always continue this conversation on our hub, which you can access from our website, and use the hashtag ILW21 if you want to talk about us anywhere on your social media. The hub, I would suggest having a look at that. It's a community forum for leaders and managers of all levels, and it's free to join. I hope you enjoy the rest of this week and that you'll find useful insights, great ideas, and, as we had today from Simerjeet, practical advice that will enable you to transform your organization. So with that, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Belbin and Heriot-Watt University's Edinburgh Business School, and particularly like to thank our special guest for today, Simerjeet Singh. Simerjeet, it's been a tremendous pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, John, for having me today, and thanks to your wonderful team once again for putting this together. You've had some great speakers come on board. I was listening myself to Professor Mintzberg, your conversation with him yesterday. Very enlightening. Keep spreading the light. We need it. We need guidance more now than ever before across the world, across the borders, and that is exactly what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simerjeet. Thank you again, and thank you everybody else for listening and watching. Thank you.